Hello, everyone, and this is Fred Schenkelberg. Welcome to the first of, I hope to be a regular series of reliability-related webinars on a series called Ascendio. So look for that logo and in the sign that's here going forward. Hopefully that'll be a meaningful and useful webinar series for you. We've got a handful of different people lined up, including this one to get it started. To, as much of anything, is to learn how to use this new software that I'm working on. There's a couple of housekeeping things. The chat window over on the left, if you can hear me all right, please let me know. I want to do just a quick sound check. If you could chat in the left-hand window there, you should be able to see something. Just let me know if it's working. Thanks, Eton. And I see Bob and Dan, Gregory, John. I haven't talked to you in a long time. Hope you're doing well. Motaz, a couple of friends. Neil, you're out there. I appreciate you all joining me today for the start of this series. And let me know if there's any questions or any problems. That chat window will remain open through, I believe, just about all of the slides we've got to talk about. So please feel free to type in at any time. And I also have a question and answer tab that will pop up occasionally, and a few other things for you to work with. Well, today's topic is value, and how do we articulate, how do we estimate or predict or categorize or capture, or whichever way you want to think about it, what's our worth? And this whole topic really came out of my boss years and years ago asking me, so what good are you? He was getting ready to do my performance review. And so he was asking me, so what good are you? What's your worth? What have you done for the organization that's useful? And so the chat window is open here. So please, have you ever gotten a question like this? Have you ever run into this circumstance? And if so, maybe just a word or two about what was the context? What did you learn out of that, or how did you get confronted with that, I should probably say. Yeah, just go ahead and type in a note or two. Have you been asked to provide value? I think John's typing, or maybe your cursor's in there, maybe a couple others. But I've heard of it as a criteria for evaluating my team members. Yes, we're not sales folks. We're not generating revenue and have sales targets and creating numbers like that. Yet our role as reliability professionals does provide value to the organization and to ourselves to a large degree. So the notion of value is sometimes obvious and sometimes a little bit hidden. And so what I want to do is talk about a couple of different examples of value and what it is, and then we'll go through a couple of calculations to show you what I mean by this. All right, Neil, gotcha. You can hear us now, all right? Hopefully everybody else is doing all right. Go into the presentation here. So value has a lot of different connotations and meanings. Personally, there's a couple of ways we commonly think about value. One of them is getting promoted or receiving awards or accolades of some sort. It's a way for our community or our peers or our organization to recognize the value that you've created. It's one common way to do it. Another is doing a presentation and receiving applause near the end of it, or receiving recognition for a job well done. from, again, your peers at our organization and so on. And a third way, just to round out this example, is you get a pay raise, you get a bonus, you get a private parking spot out front with your name on it. These three examples and others that are in this group are extrinsic rewards. They come from the outside. They come to us from other people. And some people work for pay raises, for the big house, for the nice car, for accolades, awards, recognition, things like that. And those are all external drivers, or in what we may perceive as being of value to us personally. And then there's internal or intrinsic types of value, and that includes that we are proud or happy with the job we've done. We're satisfied with our effort and with the results that we're getting, but it's from internal that we're personally satisfied with it. Another type of one is that it's like workmanship, is that you're proud of what you've accomplished and that you're using your abilities to the best of your capabilities, and you're providing value to your community and to other people. And it's, again, driven by an internal motivation that allows you to provide contributions and to see your worth in the larger context. But again, it's internally driven. And then another way is just to satisfy curiosity. If you've clicked through on a website just because it was interesting and learned something useful and felt good about that, or as you're reading the newspaper, found a headline that grabbed your attention and learned something, or used that information in another way, or ran an experiment or whatever, but it was, again, internally driven value that you learned something, you accomplished something, you've mastered something, and you were able to contribute in some meaningful way. Those are intrinsic values. But those aren't always the sole source of value. In the business world, it's quite a different look for this. And I'm going to bring up the chat window again and ask, how does your business, how does your organization quantify value? What's important to them? What are examples of value in your organization? And please go ahead and use the chat window, and let's get a couple of examples out there and see what works. Give you a moment to type. Customer value stream. Thanks, John. From needs to delivery. It's okay. That's a good one from a business point of view. Anybody else? Anybody else have how does your organization perceive value? What's important to them? Team participation, good. Meeting deadlines. Yeah, time to market is in some organizations is. I remember once I was asking a R&D manager about their priorities, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Is what's important to you in your organization? And this was a consumer product, and she said, time to market, time to market, time to market. The rest of them really don't matter. And she was pretty adamant about that. Lower cost of ownership, total cost of ownership. Well, that certainly, I hope, includes reliability or maintenance, spares, and things like that. Thanks, Gregory. The notion of value in a business, lower warranty, low returns, excellent. I mean, it generally can be summed up as money. Senior management often talks about revenue and profit margin and just dollars. It allows organizations to exist, to pay salaries, to invest in new products, and to continue to produce the products and things they provide. A complete package to the customer. Total solution. Thanks, Jeff. It's a great one. So money and profit is part of it. Market share. It's related to the same idea, but being the leader in your industry, being the leader in your market. Those are also good ideas. And then customer satisfaction. A handful of you touched on this topic of meeting your customers' needs. And from a reliability point of view, I often look at that as being meeting their needs, providing that function, whatever your product is doing, but providing it over time and without failure or without dissatisfaction in that regard. So those are ways businesses talk about value, but let's bring it home to just reliability. How do we in the reliability world perceive value or provide value? What is it more directly related to reliability engineers? And lower warranty costs, lower total cost of ownership, as Gregory talked about or mentioned, is a piece of that. Lower warranty is a piece of that. What else? What else do we do that adds value? Maybe you haven't thought about this one before. We're hired oftentimes to work in a reliability world. We're asked to help understand what the risks are, looking at what's going to fail or trying to reduce failures. That's obviously a good value proposition. But what else? Problem solving, failure analysis. Thanks, Gregory. Yeah, those are good. So let's see. I've got a couple of things listed here. One of it is our knowledge. Knowledge from a reliability engineering perspective of knowing about failure mechanisms and how products and materials and systems operate within the environment that the customers are going to be using it. Oftentimes we bring that set of questions to a design team that they may or may not have previously thought of. Prevent unexpected failures is exactly, John. To a large extent, it's the questions we ask and the experiments we run that help us to uncover those unexpected areas and weaknesses in the product. Some years ago, I was asked to a meeting about database design and structure, and this team was mapping out information flows within the organization, and it was mostly financial information and sales and warehouse values and different sets of things through all these different databases. And at the break, I asked my host, who insisted I attend this meeting, why am I here? And she said, well, you're a reliability engineer. And she said, I have learned over the years that reliability engineers think about the world in a different way. You ask questions that none of us know how to ask. And I had asked maybe one or two questions I thought were just for clarifying. And she used those as examples of, based on my experience and the field that I'm working in, we think about failures. And when we look at a system, we often see where the weaknesses are. We see areas that may or may not have higher risk. And so we tend to ask questions that illuminate those areas for other people. So it's our knowledge and our background and the way we look at things that can provide a lot of value. It also makes it difficult to get on an airplane if you take a look at how old some of them are. But I remember mentioning that to a client one time, and he's never forgiven me. Every time he gets on a plane, he thinks about that. Another one and this is related a little bit to that facilitate problem solving, but we often work to enable better decisions. We provide information, we provide context, we provide everything from a reliability prediction to field data analysis that allow the other parts of our organization to make decisions. Are we meeting our numbers? Are we good enough that this product is worth shipping? What's our risk for warranty exposure or for recalls? Or all of those kinds of things become information and context that allow us and the rest of the organization to make good decisions. Making poor decisions is costly. Making good decisions is beneficial, and there's value in that in and of itself. So it's a couple different ways to think about what we do as reliability professionals is in how we add value. Certainly talk about a couple other areas. For example, results. And fewer failures and getting problem solving are examples of results. We come in the morning, we have a variety of tasks, whether it's design and test, to work with a vendor to understand the reliability aspects of their components, to look at field data analysis, to create reports. All of those things then are results. The bottom line, though, for most organizations is that we have fewer failures and reduce the cost of those failures. Fewer failures also in many product lines translate into higher revenues and higher sales and market share and so on. So when reliability is going well, we can add quite a bit of value. It's keeping that visible, keeping that awareness within the rest of the organization alive is really one of the hardest parts of that. One of the things I've run into is in the quality organizations is when everything's working and products are not failing. This is the same boss that asked me, "What good are you?" He said, we're not having field failures. The failure rates are really low. Everything seems to be good. The customers are happy. Why do we need to pay attention to reliability? And I was pretty much floored because I was working exceedingly hard with a good part of the entire team to enable good decisions, to provide meaningful data, to uncover failure mechanisms as we work with vendors, as we work with new designs. And I looked at all that and said, well, that's because we're working on it that we have the low failure rate. Is one of the dangers in our world is that when everything's working, we become invisible. And in some organization, it's really the push to look for the hero, the person that comes in and saves the day, that does the miraculous failure analysis and solves a tenacious problem in the field and gets an elegant solution put together. Some organizations look for folks like that. They're very visible and they get rewarded. When we do our job well, we don't have those problems, and so there's no reason to solve them. And it's same with other engineering realms and so on. If the function doesn't work, if it just works, I should reverse this. If it just works, well, it's supposed to. That should be normal. And it's not as exciting. So it loses its visibility as opposed to a firefighter rolling up and putting out the fire. So it's a culture thing in organizations. When it's working well, reliability is respected and sought after as a valuable part of the team because of the value we contribute. And I was in one organization at Hewlett-Packard, and this is 15 years ago. Our CEO said that our products need to be as reliable as the sun and the moon. This was Carly Fiorioni. Always stumble on her name. But it was one of those concepts that she was reflecting our customers should have products that are just work. The old HP calculator that I had from just after college was one of those. It just worked. I could always count on it. It was a wonderful piece of equipment, and it was just a staple in my desk and in my work. I could count on it. I never worried about what its reliability objective was or anything else. I changed the battery in it once in a while, but it was as reliable as the sun and the moon. It just worked. And from a customer's perspective, that's often what they want. is that it's just works. And there's been a number of discussions in the different LinkedIn forums and in my NoMTBF site around the idea that customers often don't really know what they want. And so they'll cite an MTBF number and then be surprised when they have more failures than they expected because the supplier provided a product or a component that met the MTBF number. And I'll try to avoid going off on that tangent, but the idea is sometimes it takes work on our side to understand what a customer really wants. Another aspect of this is failure is bad. In some organizations, when a failure occurs, we learn a lot. Nobody's blamed, nobody's accused of not doing their job, but we start step back and ask questions about why did this fail? What happened here, and what can we learn? In organizations that treat failures as gold, especially through the development process, reliability and reliability engineering generally is sought after as a needed skill set and team member to help understand, look for, identify, and resolve failures. So part of the process, though, of failure is bad and how it impacts us is that nobody wants to talk about failure. There's a pressure to not tell customers, oh, well, it could fail if we do this. It could fail in this circumstance. Or the chance of failure is, you get my drift, we spin that oftentimes and change it quite often to, well, it's going to be successful 98% of the time over these 2 years, or it's going to work fine in your application. Small chance that it wouldn't, but let's focus on the value you get from what it does well. We tend to like success. We tend to like that things work. And through marketing and sales and talking to customers, we tend to focus on successes. Even calling a vendor or a supplier and asking them, well, so how does your component fail? Unless you're talking to the right person, they may not want to answer that question. So it's this, I wouldn't say it's a stigma. It's in that realm, though, that talking about failures is commonly perceived as not a good thing. But changing that culture and celebrating failures and rewarding people for identifying and finding failures is a subtle change, but it really helps an organization understand reliability and value the product reliability. The other way this shows up is in product testing. I've run into more than one person that says, well, we're going to run 3 samples and they all passed. Or we're going to run 77 samples and we ran them for this standard basic criteria and they all passed. So that's good, right? Well, is it? What did we learn? Was the test relevant? Was it useful? Did it mean anything? Was it accelerating any failure mechanisms we're interested in? What was it even turned on? Who knows? Failures provide us information, but it's commonly perceived in more than one organization I know of that we don't like failure, so we don't talk about it. And that's a common perception. So priorities. I'm going to ask you again to hit that chat window. In your organization, what's the priority? We saw earlier one of them was meeting deadlines. But in 3 of them that I'm familiar with, and I'd like to get your inputs on this, are time to market, which we mentioned earlier, cost, bill of material cost, or cost of goods sold. And what's another one? Or 2? I have 3 bungee cords on this hand here because I know of 3 that are very, very common. Schedule, yep. Meet the schedule, ship it on time. Safety, interesting, yep. Some products more so than others, but certainly user experience, good. Cost, quality, schedule. Yeah, I would add function, Jeff, to that trio. Yeah, understand warranty costs. Hopefully they just don't happen. We have low warranty costs. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, response to, yeah, Gregory, I hope that doesn't happen, responding to adverse events. Although I think GM and Toyota and a few others are getting used to responding to adverse events. Boeing in their batteries. I just heard Dell announce they're having problems with one of their batteries again. And I've seen this in trade magazines oftentimes, is you can have it fast, cheap, or the function, or the great features that it has, the feature set. And yeah, the performance certainly rolls into this. But as a designer, somebody sitting down to create a product, say an electrical engineer, they're often given this right in their product requirements document. What's the priority of this project? It might be a cost reduction project, or it might be adding features in a new feature-rich family of products, or it might be get it out on time. Consumer markets are driven by getting on schedule and getting it on the store shelves. And I think one or two people mentioned something related to quality or reliability. When you think about it, the design for reliability is often not the top priority for the development team. There's also design for manufacturing, design for environment, design for safety, and on down the list. There's a lot of priorities. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find a bungee cord picture that had 57 different cords stretching this hand. But I think you get the idea. And yeah, reliability is assumed, Jeff, and that is a problem in a lot of cases. People will say, well, it's important, and my boss wants it out on time. Doesn't care about reliability as much. It maybe has a threshold that is a barrier or a minimum threshold that has to be at least that good, and then we'll be all right. But it's not optimized by any means in that kind of environment. So the current state, value improving practices, or head reliability input for it. Yeah, good. Thanks, Greg. Yeah, so the notion is that given the current state of way organizations often think about reliability, is that it's built into the product, it's customers want it, it's a good thing, it affects the warranty, which affects our profitability. And it's awareness is in the organization. But unless there's a good set of metrics and ways to make measurements and a good reliability program, oftentimes a good reliability professional, it becomes just in the noise. Henry Petrosky wrote a book called Design Paradigms, and I know a good number of you have heard me talk about this before. But the notion is that designers inherently design away from failure. It's just part of the design or the development engineer's psyche, is they don't want the product to fail. What the reliability organizations provide and reliability professionals provide is the tools and techniques and capability, the knowledge and so on, that enables them to effectively design away from failure. So we really work with design teams, development teams, with our customers and the entire organization to make a reliable product. So given that there's lots of priorities, given that failure is often seen as bad, so it shouldn't be talked about. I've seen that more than one place. And that it's when everything's working, we don't have problems in the field. We don't have emergencies to solve. We need to have a way to talk about what we're contributing to the organization, whether we're making a proposal to say do a HALT test, or whether we've just accomplished a HALT test. And what did we get for that? What was the value of that exercise? So those are kind of the things I wanted to talk about as the heart of this presentation. So reliability is important. It's It's in the news. Eric Arnham's Warranty Week. If you don't subscribe to it, I highly recommend it. Warrantyweek.com is published. It's an email list, and he sends it out, I believe, once a week. Talks about warranty and the business of warranty management. But it also lists things like the GM recalls or the Toyota recalls or the issues with batteries that have been in the news over the past year, and many, many, many other things that make the news essentially around warranty. Within your own organization, it's related to your profits and to your sales. I remember the old HP calculator was a premium price product. It had basically the same function as any other calculator, but they were able to sell it at a higher price because it just worked. It had a solid reliability reputation. So the brand promise gets tied into this notion of where reliability becomes a value. Now, this slide and the next one are going to list a handful of different ways to calculate value, to find value in what we do. So cost, the bill of material cost or the cost of a product. If we can make the reliability targets and values correctly, oftentimes we raise the cost of the bill of material by using more robust parts, but the total cost of spares, of maintenance, of life cycle cost generally goes down. Warranty is another example of that. If we can reduce failure rates in the field, our warranty expenses go down. Materials and risk reduction are other ways that we can alter the expense of creating a product. If there's a risk of a recall, if a particular issue gets through our process of development and balances and checks and so on that we do, if we can add a bit of information or do the FMEA and find and uncover these sets of risks, we can reduce the risk of having a product recall. And how do we quantify that? It's one of the ways I wanted to explore, other than just direct failures. Another way is if we can influence the time to market or time to volume. How quickly can we, if I'll use the example in time to market, is especially in the consumer market, if you're a month late and the products are not on the shelf during the prime time that your customers are shopping, say in the holiday season, you just don't sell those products. They go find another solution, another present for their friends or family. And so you lose that capability to actually sell the product. So getting it out on time is critical. It talks about revenue. So finding and solving problems that reduce the risk of project slip becomes very valuable. Time to market also implies, if it's not critical for a holiday season, it's the time that your team is working on the development of this product. If they have to work a month longer on it, now we have opportunity costs. That team should be working on the next product or on the next round of developments, not solving problems still on this older product. Of course, there's areas of just project management and all kinds of factors influence this. Yet, I know more than one person out there has had the situation where we're a week away from launching, going into production, and our reliability testing uncovers an previously unknown failure mechanism that's going to require some major work and a delay in the program. If we can avoid those, we avoid the cost of lost opportunities. Customer satisfaction, many of us are very familiar with this. There was a study at a division of HP years ago where they did a relationship between their customer satisfaction survey results and their reliability. And they found a very solid relationship such that 1 point of customer satisfaction was related to a equivalent proportional change in their failure rate. So if they reduced their failure rate, the customer satisfaction went up, which included word of mouth sales, repurchases, all the benefits of having a customer that's very satisfied with your product. But conversely, they launched a product that had a higher failure rate than expected. and they were able to quantify the impact to customer satisfaction and to revenue and to all of the marketing costs and so on. And one of my favorites is engineering effort. I've often said I'm a relatively lazy engineer because if somebody else has already solved it, I'll use that information. And we'll talk about engineering effort in one of the examples. So there's just a short list, a quick intro to this, of the different ways you can go about exploring value. So let's take a look at HALT, Highly Accelerated Life Test. And I'm going to, in a basic definition, find weaknesses. It's a discovery tool to stress the product in multiple ways, say with temperature, with vibration, with power variations, with I think I said vibration. It could be a variety of different stresses onto the product. It could be differences in humidity. It could be altitude. It could be whatever. But the idea is what fails first, what fails, and how does it fail, and what's our margin? How good is this product for these kinds of stresses? So it's a discovery tool. And we often, well, by definition in a HALT test is we're testing to failure whenever we can. We put enough stress on it to find where it fails and understand that. So that's the basic idea of what I'm talking about with HALT testing. But what good is it? What's the value of testing to failure? So, and the other side of this is how much does it cost? So I'm going to pull up two chat windows here. Pick your favorite side or fill in a comment or two on both. For those that are familiar with HALT, what's the cost of HALT? How much does this really cost us to accomplish, to do a HALT test, for the lack of a better term? And then what are the benefits? What do we get out of doing one of these things? How would you quantify value or the benefits of HALT? So early in development, right on, John. I think you're going to steal my thunder for my example. Find what fails first so we can improve it. Bill and Dave at Hewlett-Packard did something called Build, Test, Fix. And it was, they built prototype after prototype and prototype and just looked for failures and fixed it. And the whole concept of rapid prototyping goes into it. So Tim, yeah, it does depend on stresses. Some things are very difficult to put into the laboratory. Some are relatively straightforward. I know that one of the costs is the cost of a chamber or the outside lab. Those could be $2,500 or $3,000 a day just for the chamber per day. Maybe a technician to run it for you. And looking for those early failures. HALT's pretty good at tracking down stuff like that and finding weaknesses that deal with, like if you replicate a transport process and go with worst cases for vibration and temperature, those things that would shake out in its transport, which may show up in a HALT test. Mumtaz, you're exactly right, is that HALT does cost less than a field failure. Yet when I go to my boss and say, hey, I need 2 prototypes and I'm going to go break them as many ways as I can, all they're seeing is the cost. Maybe the prototypes cost $10,000 each early on in our program, and we needed every one of them for the rest of the development team. So the samples themselves are very expensive oftentimes or very difficult to get a hold of. Breaking them, if you're in a culture where failures are bad, why would you want to go find out what's failing? What are we going to do with that information? So the costs start adding up. Yet I agree with you, John, is that with Mumtaz, that they're less than a field failure cost. Some organizations don't know what the cost of a field failure is. So then, yeah, and Tim, you're exactly right. One of the, and I'd put that on a cost or an expense side, is, yeah, sometimes you find things that really aren't going to happen in the field. What I found, and this is working with people that have done lots and lots of different halt tests, it's not a perfect test. Yet more than one organization has started the process by taking an existing product and going and doing a halt test and maybe find 10 failure mechanisms that are in that, and then map that against the Pareto of what they're seeing in the field. And in general, with the experience I've had with people that have done this, is they find about 8 out of the 10 things that are happening in the field. And so the argument is, and can we find it earlier than our customers? And then give us time to do something about it. So that's one of the biggest benefits is if I can find 80% of what would be in my Pareto later, now I have time to deal with it and to understand that failure mechanism and how it works. Yeah, prototype costs almost always, Tim, they're destroyed, which is hard for some organizations to deal with. I know many of the halt laboratories in chamber areas have duct tape and baling wire and super glue to keep units together long enough to find other failures. It's a real skill. So let's say we're going to do a halt test on a printer, and I have a HB printer sitting behind me on my desk. Let's say I'm in the development team for this, and they're going to give me 2 $10,000 prototypes to go halt test. How would I justify that cost of, it's going to be $20,000 plus the cost of the chamber, so it could be as much as $30,000 to run one sequence of halt on this product. And we're doing this relatively early, the first round of prototypes we have, and the prototypes are, say, 80, 90% complete in their development. So here's a poll. Go ahead and click the one or more ways you would approach finding value. Looks like everybody so far is picking the risk reduction, all right? Let's see. I think I've got a button here that says broadcast results. Let's see what, I think everybody can see those. So what you see here, hopefully you can see it. I should probably have a chat window open so I could ask you that, but I'll see it on the next screen, is risk reduction is, everybody that's voted has picked risk reduction. Is we're finding failures, especially failures that we weren't aware of before. And it obviously reduces our risk of having a field failure and this particular issue in the field. Customer satisfaction improvement, materials cost reduction, engineering effort saved, warranty costs, and cost reduction in general. So those are all excellent choices. And what I wanted to illustrate by picking that you would pick more than one, and I expected you would, is that there's more than one way to tally up the cost of halt. All right, so let's explore one way that I came up with. So I looked at it as a cost reduction. And it's not the strongest reason, but it adds up. So let's say that I have a 10% chance of finding a fault that I wasn't aware of before. Sometimes the design team is very arduous in their design process and careful and cautious, and they say, oh, well, if we go off and do a halt test, I already knew about that, already knew about that, already knew about that. So I'm going to be conservative, and I'm trying to justify this. And I'm going to say, we have a 10% chance of finding something unique. And because we're doing it earlier in the development process, and then it'll be less expensive to fix it now than later. So I'm thinking of the studies and the common report that it's 10 times less expensive to make a design change from one phase of the development process to the next. So as I go from early prototype phase to ramping up for production, if I find the problem late in the program, let's say that then costs me $50,000 to fix it. So if I find it and fix it earlier, it cost me 10 times less. So I save $4,500 or $45,000. Got to do the math right in my head. But there's only a 10% chance that I would find something unique that I could then apply the savings. So if I'm proposing this project and I have some experience with halt testing, maybe at another job, or I talk to people that have done lots of halt testing, or find some papers that cite it. But even being very conservative, I say, we have a 10% chance of saving $45,000. So our net savings, expected savings, is $4,500. Now, if that savings is less than the cost of running the test, as in my example, it costs us $20,000 to $30,000 to run, it's not a good argument to do it. So I would look to those other approaches to finding value in this. But it's the thought process of thinking through what's possible and adding what's the chance of doing this. Now, afterwards, right, if after the test we did find two things that we hadn't found before and we resolved it, I would add that to the halt report, that we saved $90,000 by fixing it early. And if you have the actual numbers, record it, make it visible, convert it to dollars. That's the whole idea here. Yeah, I agree, Tim. It is often hard to quantify how bad it will be in the field. And that's why I tend to be conservative. Let's say it's not the number one showstopper and everybody agrees. If it is, that's great. Then we can quantify that a lot more directly. But if it's in the less than 1% failures, it's in the long tail of our Pareto expectations, it's got a smaller number. If we're being conservative, then I start looking for engineering time saved, improved customer satisfaction, other kinds of ways to quantify the value of the halt test. So that's the idea of having these different vehicles, different ways of looking at cost reduction or value. So let me bring up another example. In accelerated life tests, is one of the things we do with it is compress time. So instead of waiting 20 years, say, for a solar panel to exist and operate, we want to know if it's going to survive for 20 years, and we do that in, say, less than a year or maybe 6 months. And we usually focus on a failure mechanism, and we attempt to replicate actual conditions as much as we possibly can. Sometimes we don't. We add risk by moving it away from actual conditions. And so the tests themselves are not always obvious that they're going to add value to us. So the costs, and you feel free to chime in with costs and some benefits, but the costs can include samples and test equipment and chambers and test equipment and so on. The very first accelerated test I did, it cost $50,000 just for the test equipment and the chambers. And we already owned the chambers. It was just time in those things. The samples are certainly going to be destroyed in any long-term test or long stress type test. The benefits, though, are what? What do we get out of a well-executed accelerated life test? We get things like we get the results sooner. We don't have to wait 20 years, obviously. Another one is we get an estimate of what's the chance of success. How many will last for 20 years? And what's the probabilities and life expectations for this product, which would fit into a larger model or may be appropriate for the entire product, especially if we have a dominant failure mechanism. So let's take a look at what approach to use. So I think this is my poll again. So how would you quantify this? Let me reopen this and clear the answers. For an accelerated life test, how would you approach it? What would be the most likely way to do it? The very first accelerated life test was that I did was for a heating cable that was going to get buried in concrete and bridges. And they wanted to know how many would survive 20 years. And so my first question to my boss when he asked me that question was, well, when do you need to know? And he said, well, in 6 months. So kind of jumped into the deep end of the pool and doing accelerated testing. But it was risk reduction from the customer's point of view. They didn't want to buy and install these things into large concrete bridges if there was a chance that they wouldn't last 20 years. They wanted a solution that would last a significant portion of the life of the bridge. So for them, knowing how long it would last was a significant risk reduction for them. Good. And again, you see it's a different distribution of ways to look at how to calculate it, but there's certainly more than one approach. And so what I looked at was, let's look at risk reduction. What's the estimated life accuracy? So let's say I can run a test that gives me 90% probability or a 10% type 1 error, looking at it from a statistical point of view, 90% confidence that I'm at least 10 years or better. And let's say that's my decision point, whether we start shipping this product or not. If it's got a significant failure rate at 10 years, then if we don't know that information, we're at an increased risk for warranty costs and recall costs. So having a estimate, even if it's flawed, allows us to reduce the risk that we're taking by being blind, by being unknowing what the part of it is. Yeah, Tim, I like your comment on what if you get no failures in your ALT. In my opinion, that's a poorly designed accelerated life test. Generally, I try to test to failure because those failures help me validate that the test is testing the thing I was expecting to test, which probably isn't the best sentence in the world. Let's do one more real quick. This is, what's the value of a webinar? Each of you have invested an hour approximately, maybe a little bit more time as you saw the write-up on it and registered and so on. But what's an hour worth? You know, there's cost, but you get some networking. You get to hear another person's views and opinions and stuff. As we bring in more speakers to this series or to other programs, you get to hear different voices, different people, expand your own set of contacts and so on, and that has value. You avoid the travel. We didn't have to do an evening meeting and travel and price of gas and just the extra travel time. That's often worth doing. And just professional development. Maybe it's those ideas or a couple of concepts that we can take away that improve how we do our job. I certainly hope that applies today. So the webinar costs and benefits, I'll summarize it very quickly, is it's an hour of your time. What's your salary? What's your loaded costs for overhead and management and IT costs, things like that? And then what's the benefits? Well, hopefully the benefit is that you do something different. In this case, I hope it's that you calculate the value of what you're working on. Make it visible. If it's not only for your review period or for when your boss asks, so what good are you? But it also is a benefit for you to be more persuasive when proposing a project or a test. Or after the fact, it's answering the question, what have you contributed? What difference did you make? And whether that's with the development team or your manufacturing team or even with suppliers. Quantify it in the terms of management, which is dollars, can help both you as individually and your organization be more effective in designing and developing reliable products. So there's a variety of different approaches. Looking at a webinar, outlined a handful of those, but let's say it's just engineering effort saved. Let's say you learned something in a webinar, say how to do an accelerated life test or to do data analysis, and it would save you time of learning it yourself. Or maybe you picked up a context of how to interpret something, or in this case, how to quantify value. And maybe this set of hints and tips and stuff would save you a couple of weeks. So for an hour, you saved 40 hours or saved 80 hours. And the math is pretty direct. So one of the ways I've had engineering effort saved years ago is I did about 2 weeks of work to understand an isolated failure mechanism of ceramic capacitors, where if they cracked, there was a good chance that they would get really, really hot, become a visual thermal event. But over the next 3 months, I was able to share that information with a dozen different divisions within the organization, saving them the 2 weeks of doing the same work. So 12 times 12, or 12 times 2 weeks, say 10 days, it's 120 engineering days saved. It was one way to convey the savings that was in it. Also reducing failure rates and solving problems faster, all of those different approaches start to apply. So let me wrap up. And I certainly appreciate everybody's contributions in the chat windows and so on. So Jeff, one way to get into more detail, and I pulled up a set of links in the bottom right-hand corner. So the Musings on Reliability and Maintenance has, I think, about 6 or 7 articles or posts on value. So if you go to the Musings blog page and search for value, you'll find most of my writing that's on that area. If you'd rather have it in an ebook or in a bound copy of some sort, there's a link there to be able to buy a copy of a book that I got published about a week ago. The idea, though, of value and how we convey what we've done and didn't do is one of our ways to combat all of the different forces that are saying reliability is okay, reliability is assumed, reliability is, don't bother me with that, I've got to get this out on time, or I have to get the costs down. So think of it as that the rest of the organization has many, many priorities. And by talking about value and putting it in terms of dollars and articulating it clearly helps you win that fight more often than not. Being effective at your job as a reliability engineer is good for you and for your organization. So I've written way more about this and a lot more details in the Finding Value short book that it's been just put out. I believe, if I remember the number right, it's got 74 pages and it's meant to be read online. So the PDF is pretty easy to read on your screen or whatever device you want. But my final thought is that with a little bit of work, right, we can quantify and answer the question that when your boss walks up to you and says, so what good are you? They might not ask it that way, but you know what I mean. So be prepared. As you accomplish things, as you knock off projects and tasks, sit down and think about, well, what's the value? How do I quantify that? Jot it down, and then have that ready to pull out and explain why we're doing halt testing, why we're doing whatever it is in the reliability world that we need to do.